My mother sent me a bill for $347,000 and labeled it, in all capital letters, "Cost of raising a failure." She did not send it privately. Of course, that would have required mercy. And Margaret Sterling had always considered mercy a poor investment. She sent it during my sister Brooke's garden party, right between the champagne toast and the tiny crab cakes that tasted like disappointment on a cracker. The party was supposed to celebrate Brooke making a business magazine's top 40 under 40 list. My mother had rented out the back lawn of the Sterling estate, brought in white tents, live jazz, a florist from Boston, and enough catered shrimp to make the Atlantic Ocean nervous. Everyone was there, relatives I had not seen since childhood, my father's business partners, my mother's charity friends, Brooke's glossy little circle of women who used the word brand the way normal people use salt, and me, Quinn Sterling, 28 years old, forensic data analyst, family afterthought, professional disappointment. According to the woman who gave birth to me and apparently kept the receipt, I arrived in a navy blazer, ivory blouse, and the kind of low heels you wear when you know rich people are going to make you stand on grass for 3 hours while pretending not to notice you. My mother saw me at the gate and gave me the same smile she gave delivery drivers when they parked too close to the fountain. "Quinn," she said, air kissing somewhere near my cheek. "You made it." That was Margaret Sterling's way of saying, I was hoping traffic would do what good manners could not. My father, Arthur, stood behind her in a gray suit, holding a glass of sparkling water and looking like a man who had spent his life mistaking silence for wisdom. "Hi, Dad," I said. He patted my shoulder. Not a hug, a pat. Like I was an old copier that still jammed but belonged to the office. "Good to see you, kiddo," he said. Kiddo. I had a retirement account, a mortgage, and back pain when it rained. But kiddo. Across the lawn, Brooke was glowing under a flower arch, laughing for a photographer. My older sister had always known how to stand where the light was best. She wore a white designer dress and a smile that made every camera forgive her. People kept congratulating her for being a visionary entrepreneur, which was generous, considering her last 3 ventures had produced 1 failed app, 2 unpaid interns, and a candle line that smelled like bankruptcy with vanilla undertones. Still, in our family, Brooke did not fail. Brooke pivoted. I did not succeed. I got lucky. That was the Sterling family math. Brooke was the asset. I was the liability. When we were kids, Brooke got piano lessons, tennis coaching, summer leadership camps, and private tutors who came to the house with leather briefcases. I got told I was independent. That is a lovely word when it means capable. In my house, it meant unfunded. Brooke cried, and everyone gathered. I cried, and someone closed a door. By the time I learned to ride a bike, I had also learned not to ask for applause. By high school, I knew how to fill out financial aid forms. By college, I knew how to work night shifts and study on vending machine coffee. By 28, I knew how to trace a deleted file through 6 servers and prove who touched it, when, and from what device. That skill would matter later. At the party, it mostly made me notice things other people missed, like the way my mother kept checking her phone, like the way Brooke's smile sharpened every time she looked at me, like the way my father avoided eye contact whenever someone asked what I did for work. One of my mother's friends, a woman named Evelyn, with pearls the size of aspirin, leaned toward me near the lemonade table. "And what are you doing these days, dear?" "I work in forensic data analysis." "Oh," she said, blinking. "Is that like computers?" "Yes," I said, "but with fewer passwords taped under keyboards. Ideally." She gave a polite laugh and immediately turned toward Brooke, who was telling a small crowd that success came from courage, discipline, and believing in yourself. Funny. I had always thought it came from having your parents pay your rent until 30, but I kept that thought to myself because I was raised with manners. Not equal treatment, but definitely manners. About an hour into the party, my mother tapped a butter knife against her champagne glass. The sound floated across the lawn, bright and delicate. "Everyone," she called. "Could I have your attention for just a moment?" The jazz trio softened. Conversations died down. Brooke moved to my mother's side and folded her hands like she had practiced the pose in a mirror. My father stepped behind them, smiling vaguely, already half gone in his head. I stood near the back, beside a round table stacked with dessert plates. My mother lifted her glass. "Today is about family," she said. "It is about investment, sacrifice, and knowing when our efforts have finally produced something worthwhile." Several guests smiled at Brooke. Brooke lowered her eyes modestly, which was impressive, since modesty usually required at least passing familiarity with humility. My mother continued, "Arthur and I are so proud of Brooke. She has honored the Sterling name through ambition, grace, and measurable achievement." Measurable achievement. My mother loved words that sounded like they belonged in a shareholder report. Then her eyes shifted toward me. Only for a second. But I felt it. "However," she said, "family also requires honesty." My phone vibrated in my blazer pocket. Then another phone pinged. Then another. All around the lawn. Guests looked down at their screens. 50 phones. Maybe more. Lighting up under the white tents. A ripple moved through the crowd. Confusion first. Then curiosity. Then the kind of silence people use when gossip arrives dressed as concern. I pulled out my phone. There it was. An email from Margaret Sterling. Not just to me. To my father. To Brooke. To cousins. Uncles. Aunts. Donors. Business partners. Neighbors. And at least one retired minister who had once baptized our family dog by accident during a very confusing Easter brunch. The subject line read, "Sterling Family Asset Recovery, Quinn Sterling." Attached was a PDF. My thumb did not shake when I opened it. That surprised me. The first page looked like an invoice. Clean formatting. Sterling family crest at the top. My full legal name beneath it. Quinn Elise Sterling. Balance due, $347,000. Under that, in bold, cost of raising a failure. For a moment, the party disappeared around the edges. Not because I fainted. Not because I broke down. Nothing that dramatic. Real humiliation is quieter than people think. It sits down beside you, crosses its legs, and waits to see what you will do. I scrolled. Hospital birth costs, childhood housing allocation, food expenses, private school application fees. Even though I went to public school after 5th grade, emotional labor, opportunity cost for time wasted, unreturned parental investment. There was even a line for social embarrassment mitigation, which was a fancy way of saying my mother had charged me for not being Brooke. I heard a soft laugh nearby. Brooke had moved closer. She leaned in, smelling like gardenias and expensive cruelty. "It's about time you paid your rent for existing, Quinn." I looked at her. She smiled without showing her teeth. Brooke always did enjoy a clean kill. Socially speaking, my mother was still talking, but her voice came from far away. "We believe in accountability," she told the crowd. "And sometimes accountability begins at home." A few guests looked at me with pity, a few with judgment, most with hunger. People pretend they dislike public family conflict, but hand them a scandal with good catering, and suddenly, everybody has excellent posture. My father cleared his throat once. He did not step forward. He did not say my name. He did not say, "Margaret, stop." He did what Arthur Sterling did best. He became furniture. I should have felt anger first. I did not. I felt a clean, cold focus. That was my job training kicking in. When something looked wrong, I did not react to the insult. I looked for the error. I scrolled again. The invoice had categories, dates, notes, and supporting references. Whoever made it had spent time on it. Too much time. People think cruelty is impulsive. Sometimes it has formatting. Then I saw a line near the bottom. Legal settlement fees. 2019. $85,000. I stopped breathing for half a second. Not because the number scared me, because it made no sense. I had never been sued. I had never settled a case. I had never signed court papers. I hired a litigation attorney, or stepped inside a Delaware courthouse in my life. I zoomed in. The line item had a reference code beside it, a file number, short, precise, and probably copied from a real document. My mother kept speaking. Brooke kept smiling. The guests kept staring. And I stood there holding the first piece of evidence my family had ever handed me voluntarily. That was the thing about people like my mother. They loved humiliation so much. They forgot humiliation, created records. I locked my phone and slid it back into my pocket. Brooke tilted her head. Nothing to say? I looked past her. Toward my mother. Then my father. Then the crowd of people pretending they were not reading every line of my so-called failure bill. No, I said calmly. Not here. Brooke's smile flickered. My mother's glass paused halfway to her mouth. I picked up my purse from the dessert table. For 28 years, my family had mistaken my silence for weakness. That was their first mistake. Their second mistake was putting a PDF in front of a forensic data analyst. I walked off the lawn without crying, without shouting, and without giving them the scene they wanted. Behind me, the jazz started again. A little too loudly. In my pocket, my phone felt heavier than it should have. A $347,000 insult. A fake debt. A legal settlement I had never heard of. And one line item that told me my mother's little family announcement was not just cruel, it was sloppy. The cold night air hit my face before I reached the driveway, and I welcomed it like a witness who had finally decided to tell the truth. Behind me, the Sterling estate still glowed under those white party tents. Jazz floated over the lawn. Glasses clinked. People whispered. I could almost hear them sorting me into categories. Unstable. Ungrateful. Embarrassing. Poor Margaret's difficult daughter. That was fine. Let them whisper. Whispers do not hold up in court. Records do. I unlocked my car, slid into the driver's seat, and sat there for a moment with both hands on the wheel. My phone was on the passenger seat, face up, still showing my mother's email. The subject line stared at me like a slap wearing a business suit. Sterling Family Asset Recovery. Quinn Sterling. Asset Recovery. That was rich. My family had spent my entire life treating me like the dented can in the back of the pantry. And now they wanted to pretend I had been an investment. I did not drive home. Home was too soft a place for what I needed to do. My apartment had laundry on the chair, half a carton of oat milk in the fridge, and a couch that encouraged denial. I needed screens, secure access, and coffee strong enough to make a spoon reconsider its choices. So I drove to my office. I worked for a private forensic accounting and data analysis firm in downtown Hartford. We handled fraud cases, internal audits, financial disputes, deleted records, forged digital trails. The whole beautiful mess people leave behind when they think nobody technical will look under the rug. The building was almost empty when I arrived. The security guard, Mr. Lawson, looked up from his paperback and gave me a nod. Late one. Miss Sterling? Family event, I said. He winced. Say no more. See. Mr. Lawson understood life. I took the elevator up to the 6th floor, let myself into our office suite, and flipped on only the light above my desk. I liked working in partial darkness, fewer distractions, fewer reflections, fewer chances to see my own face and wonder why I had ever expected better. I hung my blazer over my chair, opened my laptop, and forwarded my mother's email to my secure work account. Then I downloaded the PDF into an isolated folder. Not because I thought my mother was a cyber mastermind, but because wealthy people with bad intentions often hired people who were almost competent. Almost competent is where the fun begins. The file name was neat. Sterling, Family, Asset, Recovery, Q Sterling, Final. PDF, Final. People love putting final on documents right before they make a terrible mistake. I started with the basics. Filecies, creation date, modification date, embedded author fields, software version, export history. Metadata is not magic. It is more like dust on a windowsill. Most people never notice it. But if you know what to look for, it tells you who has been in the room. At first, the visible author field showed Margaret Sterling. Of course it did. My mother would never humiliate me without signing the artwork. But visible fields can be edited. Embedded data is less polite. I ran the PDF through a metadata extractor, then checked the document properties against the export logs. The file had been created 2 days earlier, at 11:42 at night, using a registered copy of design software. The machine name appeared in the embedded history. BKS MacBook Pro. I leaned back. IKS today. Brooke Catherine Sterling. My sister had made the invoice. Not helped. Not reviewed. Not forwarded. Created. That little discovery did not hurt the way the email had. It clarified things. There is a difference. Pain makes you feel trapped. Clarity gives you a door. I opened a fresh case file on my system. Because if my family wanted to turn my life into a debt collection matter, I believed in being organized. Case title: Sterling Identity Review. It sounded calmer than "My mother lost her mind at a garden party," and more professional than "Brooke finally got too cute." I saved screenshots of the metadata. I exported the embedded fields. I preserved the original email header, including recipient list, timestamp, source routing, and attachment hash. My mother had not just embarrassed me, she had distributed a financial claim about me to business contacts, relatives, and social acquaintances. In plain English, she had created a record of reputational damage that was going in the folder. Then I went back to the invoice. The fake charges were insulting, but insult alone was not what pulled me to the screen. The line item for legal settlement fees, 2019, kept blinking in my mind. $85,000. The reference code beside it was formatted like a real case tracking number. Too specific to be decorative. Too dull to be invented by Brooke. Unless someone had handed it to her. I copied the code into a secure search platform we used for public records and court filings. I expected nothing. I got a hit. Delaware. My stomach tightened. But my hands stayed steady. The result was partially sealed, which meant I could see enough to know it existed. Not enough to read every page without a formal request. Still, there was a case caption, a vendor dispute involving a limited liability company. Q. End of TES. Logistics. I stared at the name. W. Co. S. Quinn Sterling. Except I had never formed a logistics company. I had never owned a truck, leased a warehouse, shipped inventory, or so much as mailed a birthday card on time without feeling proud of myself. I pulled the business registration. Q. S. Logistics LLC had been formed in Delaware in early 2019. The registered agent was a corporate service provider, the kind people use when they want a company to look clean and anonymous. The listed managing member was Quinn E. Sterling. My full middle initial, my home address at the time, my date of birth, and the last 4 digits of my social security number. I sat very still. There is a special kind of anger that does not raise your voice. It lowers your temperature. Somebody had used my identity to form a company. The company had been sued for unpaid vendor fees. The settlement amount matched my mother's invoice. $85,000. I opened another search window and ran a deeper background check on myself. The kind I had run for clients hundreds of times. Lien. Judgments. Business affiliations. Civil filings. Address history. Credit anomalies. Known associates. I found Q. S. Logistics again. Then I found a settlement summary attached to a vendor collection database. It did not include the full document, but it included enough. Authorized signer, Quinn E. Sterling. Settlement executed, late 2019. Payment obligation, $85,000. I had to laugh once. Quietly. Not because it was funny. Because if I did not laugh, I might start naming office furniture as defendants. I had never signed that settlement. In 2019, I had been working 60-hour weeks, paying off student loans, and eating enough microwave soup to qualify as a sodium-based life form. I had not been settling vendor disputes in Delaware. I requested the archived filing through one of our legal research accounts. While I waited, I pulled every old document I had from that year. Driver's license scans, bank records, work contracts, tax filings, employment verification, anything that could place me somewhere else when the company was formed and when the settlement was signed. The filing came through 40 minutes later. The signature page loaded first. There it was, Quinn E. Sterling. My name, written in a slanted hand that looked nothing like mine. I do not sign like that. My signature is ugly, fast, and practical. It looks like a doctor and a grocery list got into a small argument. This signature was curved, Dramatic. And far too pleased with itself. I knew that handwriting. Brooke wrote capital S's like little hooks. She always had. In birthday cards. Thank you notes. Fake inspirational quotes under her social media posts. Same hook. Same pressure pattern. Same little flourish under the final letter. Because even her handwriting needed applause. I ran a comparison using stored samples I had from old family cards and public documents Brooke had signed for her failed companies. It was not a courtroom-certified forensic handwriting report. Not yet. But the software gave me a preliminary similarity score. 94%. I looked at the number for a long time. Brooke had not just helped my mother make a nasty invoice. She had used my name as a legal shield. My sister. The celebrated entrepreneur. The shining asset. The woman under the flower arch being praised for vision and discipline. Had created a shell company with my identity. Run up vendor debt. Signed my name to settle it. And tucked the mess away where she thought I would never find it. Then, years later, she had put that same settlement into a public invoice and called it my failure. That was not arrogance. That was a gift-wrapped confession. My phone buzzed. A text from Brooke. You really walked out? Mom is devastated. You always make things about yourself. I stared at it, then typed nothing. Another message appeared. You should apologize before this gets worse. I smiled. There it was. The family motto. Apologize for noticing. I took screenshots of the messages and added them to the case file. Then I searched my credit history again. Deeper this time. Looking for accounts I had never opened. Addresses I had never used. Business loans tied to my name. Anything connected to Q.S. Logistics. A small note appeared on an old background report. Associated entity. Sterling Holdings Administrative Trust. My grandmother's surname sat inside that phrase like a locked door. Hattie Sterling. Retired state judge. Family legend. Officially. According to my mother. Not herself anymore. Unofficially. The only person in our family who had ever looked at me like I was a human being instead of an accounting error. I had not seen Grandma Hattie in months. Margaret said visits upset her. Brooke said Hattie got confused. Arthur said it was better not to stir things up. Of course they said that. By then it was nearly 2 a.m. My office coffee had gone cold. My eyes burned. And my case folder had grown from one insulting PDF into a map of fraud with my name stamped all over it. I printed the metadata report. The Delaware filing. The signature comparison. And the invoice page with the $85,000 line item. I placed them in a plain folder and wrote one word on the tab. Hattie. Before I shut down my laptop, I opened the original failure bill one more time. $347,000. Cost of raising a failure. My mother thought that title would shame me. Brooke thought the crowd would break me. My father thought silence would protect him. But they had all forgotten one simple thing. When you hand a forensic data analyst a document, you are not handing her an insult. You are handing her a trail. I left the folder on my passenger seat like it had its own legal rights. Then drove through the empty streets with one name repeating in my head. Hattie. Grandma Hattie lived 40 minutes outside Hartford. In a brick estate house that had been in our family longer than my mother's ability to hold a grudge. Which was saying something. The place sat behind a black iron gate. With old maple trees lining the driveway and a stone fountain near the front steps. When I was little, I thought it looked like a courthouse pretending to be a home. That made sense later. Before she was Grandma Hattie with lemon cookies and strict opinions about table manners, Harriet Sterling had been Judge Harriet Elaine Sterling. State Court? Civil Division. Known for reading every filing before breakfast and making attorneys regret sloppy work before lunch. My mother claimed Hattie had gone soft in the head. She gets confused now. Margaret always said, it's kinder not to upset her. That sentence should have bothered me sooner. In the Sterling family, kinder usually meant more convenient for Margaret. I reached the estate a little before 3 a.m. I expected the gate to be locked. Instead, it opened after I pressed the call button once. No voice. No question. Just the gate sliding back like someone had been waiting. The house was lit in only a few windows. I parked near the front steps and grabbed the folder. Before I could knock, the door opened. A woman named Mrs. Alvarez stood there in a navy robe and slippers. She had worked for my grandmother since I was in middle school and had never once looked impressed by rich people. I trusted her immediately for that alone. "Miss Quinn," she said, calm as a bank vault. "Judge Sterling is in the study." Not Mrs. Sterling. Judge Sterling. That told me more than any medical update my mother had ever given. I followed her down the hall. The house smelled like furniture polish, old books, and the peppermint tea Hattie drank when she was either relaxed or preparing to ruin someone's afternoon. In the study, a brass lamp glowed beside a wide mahogany desk. Legal pads sat in neat stacks. File boxes lined one wall, and behind the desk sat my grandmother. Not confused, not fragile, not drifting in some fog, the way my mother had implied. Grandma Hattie wore a dark robe over a cream blouse, her silver hair pinned back, her reading glasses low on her nose. Her cane rested against the desk within easy reach. Her eyes were sharp enough to cut ribbon. "You took longer than I expected," she said. I stopped in the doorway. "You knew I was coming?" "I knew your mother was hosting Brooke's little tribute to purchased excellence. I knew Margaret had been pacing all week like a raccoon near a trash can. And I knew if she finally did something foolish in writing, you would come here?" I blinked. Then I laughed. Once, because my nervous system had clearly chosen variety. "She sent everyone a bill," I said. "I know." My mouth closed. Hattie tapped a folder on her desk. "Mrs. Alvarez's nephew works events. He sent me a screenshot before dessert." Of course he did. Never underestimate a family employee with a nephew and a group chat. I walked to the desk and handed over my folder. "It is worse than a bill." Hattie opened it without drama. That was one of the things I loved about her. Margaret could turn opening an envelope into community theater. Hattie treated information like ammunition. Quietly, carefully. With safety on until needed, she read the first page. Then, the metadata report. Then, the Delaware filing. When she reached the signature comparison, she did not gasp. She did not say, "Oh my." She removed her glasses, set them on the desk, and looked toward the dark window. "That child," she said softly, "has always mistaken attention for immunity." I sat across from her. Brooke created the PDF. The embedded machine name points to her laptop. The Delaware company used my name, my address, and part of my social security number. The signature on the settlement is not mine. "No," Hattie said. "It would not be." "You knew about Q.S. Logistics?" I suspected. I did not have the document. That hit me harder than expected. "Why did nobody tell me?" Hattie turned back to me. And for the first time that night, her face softened. "Because I did not have proof strong enough to protect you. Suspicion is a loose thread. Quinn. Pull too early, and the whole coat gets thrown away before anyone sees where it unraveled." That sounded like the judge in her. It also sounded like someone who had been watching my family rot from the inside and waiting for the right tool. I looked at the file boxes along the wall. "What are these?" "My ledger." "Your what?" "My ledger," she repeated. "Your mother likes invoices. I prefer records." She stood slowly, leaning on the desk for only half a second before taking her cane. There was nothing weak about the movement. It was measured, efficient, like she refused to waste energy on appearing younger, when appearing ready was more useful. She crossed to the wall and pulled a gray file box from the middle shelf. "Mrs. Alvarez" appeared silently and carried it to the desk. The label read, "Sterling Daughters Trusts." My throat tightened. I had heard about family trusts growing up the way some kids hear about college funds. Vaguely. In passing. Always as something for later. Brooke talked about hers constantly in high school. Usually, when explaining why she did not need a summer job. Mine was never discussed. "Margaret told me I did not have one. You were too independent for that kind of thing," she had said. I had believed her. That may have been the most expensive mistake of my life. Hattie opened the box and removed two thick folders. One labeled Brooke Catherine Sterling. One labeled Quinn Elise Sterling. She placed mine in front of me. "I established both trusts when Brooke was 5 and you were 2, Hattie said. "Separate instruments. Equal starting amounts. Conservative growth. Educational use allowed. Full beneficiary access at 18. Unless there was documented misconduct. Incapacity." Or court restriction. I stared at my name on the folder. My full name. Typed cleanly. Legally. Real. How much? I asked. Hattie did not look away. By the time you turned 18, yours should have held approximately $500,000. The room went still. $500,000. That number did not feel like money at first. It felt like alternate versions of my life standing in a line. College without overnight shifts, rent without panic, dental work done on time, a car that did not make a grinding noise every time I turned left, a young woman who did not think survival was a personality trait. I opened the folder. Inside were trust documents, bank statements, trustee correspondence, and distribution records. Hattie had marked pages with small yellow tabs. Her handwriting was neat, firm, and familiar. The first statements showed steady growth. Then, in the month after my 18th birthday, everything changed. Withdrawal, transfer, administrative reallocation, emergency family liquidity adjustment. That phrase made me want to throw the folder across the room. But I had been raised not to damage evidence. The balance dropped to zero. I looked up. Who authorized this? Hattie's jaw tightened. Your father became administrative trustee after my surgery that year. Temporarily. At least, that was the agreement. My father? Yes. And my mother? She was not authorized to touch the trust directly. Directly, I said. Hattie's eyes sharpened. Exactly. She reached for Brooke's folder and opened it. Brooke's trust was not much better. Not stolen in one clean sweep. Drained over years through consulting reimbursements, brand development expenses, lifestyle advances, and business coaching programs that seemed to cost more than medical school and produce less than a lemonade stand. Brooke spent hers, Hattie said. Foolishly, but mostly with permission. Yours was different. I flipped another page and found a transfer record. The recipient account had my mother's name on it. Margaret Elise Sterling. My mother had taken money meant for my future, not borrowed, not saved, not protected, taken. I sat back slowly. The old childhood ache rose up, but it came with something new now. Shape, proof, dates, account numbers. Pain is easier to dismiss when it has no paperwork. This had plenty. Hattie placed her hand over mine. Her fingers were thin, but her grip was solid. Listen to me carefully. Quinn, what they did to you was not favoritism. Favoritism is giving one child the bigger bedroom. This was conversion, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. And if your sister used your identity in Delaware, it may be more. I swallowed. My mother's invoice lay open beside the trust documents. Cost of raising a failure, $347,000. I looked from that insult to the records showing $500,000 missing from my trust. For the first time all night, the pattern became clear. The bill was not just cruelty. It was cover. My family was not trying to collect a debt from me. They were trying to hide the one they owed. I kept my hands on the trust documents until the paper stopped feeling like paper and started feeling like a crime scene. Grandma Hattie did not rush me. That was another difference between her and my mother. Margaret believed silence was something to fill, preferably with judgment. Hattie understood silence could be useful. It gave the truth room to sit down and make itself comfortable. The office clock on her mantel said nearly 4 a.m. Outside, the estate was dark except for the driveway lights and the pale glow over the old fountain. Inside, the desk between us held my mother's failure bill, the Delaware settlement, Brooke's signature sample, and the bank statements showing my trust had been drained the month I turned 18. $500,000 had vanished from my future, and my mother had the nerve to bill me for cereal. I tapped the transfer record with one finger. This went into Mom's personal account? Yes, Hattie said. Then what? That, she said, is what I could not prove without your help. She opened another drawer and removed a slim black binder. It was labeled Sterling Household Discretionary Accounts. Of course, my grandmother had a binder for that. Some grandmothers knitted. Mine maintained financial surveillance like a retired courthouse eagle. I kept copies of what I could access before Arthur removed me from several administrative permissions. She said. He removed you? Temporarily, he claimed, during my recovery from surgery. Let me guess. Temporary lasted about 10 years. Hattie gave me a dry look. In this family, temporary means until caught. I almost smiled. Almost. She pushed the binder toward me. I traced the first transfer from your trust into Margaret's account. Then the trail became muddy. Smaller payments. Reimbursements. Consulting fees. Charity contributions. Event retainers. The usual respectable words people use when they want theft to wear perfume. I opened my laptop on the edge of her desk and connected to my secure workspace through a protected network. Hattie watched without asking questions. Most people my grandmother's age either distrusted technology or called every device the computer, like it was a household spirit. Hattie simply waited. Because she knew tools changed, but evidence did not. I entered the routing details from the transfer record and began building a flowchart. Money out of Quinn Sterling Trust. Into Margaret Sterling personal checking. Then broken into smaller outbound transfers over several months. Some went to credit card payments. Some to Arthur's firm. Some to a public relations agency. Some to a private business consultant in New York. One went to a firm called Ambrose Recognition Group. That name stopped me. I searched it. Award promotion. Executive branding. Paid media placement. Sponsored leadership lists. Event packaging. I leaned back slowly. Grandma Hattie noticed. What is it? Ambrose Recognition Group helped produce Brooks' award package. Hattie's face did not change. But her eyes sharpened. I opened Brooks' Top 40 Under 40 announcement from the business magazine website. At the bottom, in tiny print, below all the glowing nonsense about innovation and influence, was a sponsorship disclosure naming Ambrose Recognition Group as a promotional partner. I cross-checked the date. The payment from my mother's account had gone out 2 weeks before Brooke was nominated. I clicked into the invoice details attached to the bank transfer. There it was. Executive profile development. Nomination support. Award event placement. Media package. Total amount, $72,000. I let out a breath. They bought it, I said. Hattie did not ask what. She already knew. The award Brooke was celebrating tonight. I said. The one Mom turned into a public trial of my existence. They used money from my trust to buy the package that put Brooke on that stage. Hattie's hand tightened around the top of her cane. For a second, I saw the grandmother under the judge. Not weaker, just wounded. She was supposed to have her own trust. I said. Brooke had money. She spent it. Hattie said. And your parents made excuses for every dollar. I went back to the flowchart. Arthur's firm appeared in the transfer chain 3 separate times. Sterling Asset Management. That was my father's company. He liked to describe it as a legacy advisory firm, which was a fancy way of saying he helped wealthy people stay wealthy while pretending taxes were weather. The transfers were not huge by themselves. 20,000, 35,000, 19,000. Respectable amounts. If you did not know they came from a stolen trust, then I found a recurring phrase in the notes. Short-term liquidity bridge. I searched Arthur's firm filings. Most of the public-facing documents were clean. Too clean. Polished quarterly letters. Conservative language. Lots of words like stability, heritage, and client confidence. Whenever a company says client confidence too often, somebody is usually sweating through an expensive shirt. I dug into business credit reports, lien searches, and recent regulatory notices. There it was, a pending audit. Not criminal. Not yet. But serious. Arthur's firm had been flagged over collateral irregularities and short-term capital reporting. The kind of problem that made banks nervous and investors suddenly remember they had lunch elsewhere. One internal note referenced an urgent liquidity gap. The amount needed to stabilize the next review period was listed as estimated. $347,000. I looked at the failure bill. $347,000. Same amount. Not close. Exact. My mother had not chosen that number because she had itemized 28 years of childhood expenses. She had chosen it because Arthur's firm needed it. The garden party. The invoice. The public shame. The debt collection thread. All of it had been designed to pressure me into paying a financial hole I did not create. I laughed again. Quietly. Hattie looked at me. Sorry, I said. It is just hard to respect a family that commits fraud and still cannot do it elegantly. That arrogance is why they get caught. I highlighted the liquidity gap and added it to the case file. Then I opened the email recipient list from my mother's message. 50 people. Extended family. Social donors. Business contacts. A few of Arthur's clients. Brooke's future in-laws were not on the email. Which told me something. They humiliated me in front of people they could control. I said. Hattie nodded. But not the Vances. Because Brooke's engagement depends on that family believing she is an asset. A clean asset, Hattie said. I remembered Silas Vance standing near the rose arbor at the party. Speaking with my father. He was tall, polished, quiet. His father had not attended the garden party, but his name had been mentioned at least a dozen times by people who sounded nervous while praising him. Old money did that to new money. It made them sweat politely. Brooke was not just celebrating an award. She was being packaged, award-winning entrepreneur. Sterling daughter. Future Vance bride. Safe merger. Clean reputation. My trust had funded the costume. Arthur's firm needed the cash. Margaret needed me humiliated enough to comply. Brooke needed my name to remain dirty so hers could stay polished. The whole structure was ugly. But it was not random. That helped. Random cruelty can make you feel crazy. Structured cruelty gives you something to dismantle. Hattie reached across the desk and turned the failure bill so it faced her. She read the title again. Cost of raising a failure. Her mouth tightened. Your mother always did lack imagination. That is not fair. I said. She found a very creative way to confess to financial pressure, defamation, and possible extortion in one attachment. For the first time that night, Hattie smiled. It was small, but it was real. Then her expression hardened again. They will come after you once they know you are looking. They already came after me. No, she said. They embarrassed you. That was their opening move. When cornered, Margaret will use reputation. Arthur will use paperwork. Brooke will use panic and tears. Do not mistake volume for danger. But do not ignore it either. I nodded. That was advice worth keeping. Especially for anyone with a family that knew how to make cruelty sound like concern. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother, Quinn. Leaving like that was unnecessary. We can discuss a reasonable payment plan once you calm down. I showed the text to Hattie. She read it once and handed the phone back. Do not respond. I was not planning to tame. Good. Never interrupt someone while they are building your evidence file. I saved the message. Then another text arrived. This one from my father. Your mother is upset. Please don't escalate this. The family is under pressure right now. There it was. Under pressure. Not sorry. Not what happened was wrong. Just pressure. I saved that too. My mother had called me a failure in front of 50 people to collect the exact amount my father's firm needed to survive an audit. My sister had used my identity to hide a failed business. My trust fund had been drained to build Brooke's fake public image. And my father wanted me not to escalate. That was the thing about enablers. They never called it peace when the victim was bleeding quietly. They only discovered peace when the victim reached for a bandage and a lawyer. By sunrise, Hattie and I had built a timeline. My 18th birthday. Trust, access, sudden withdrawal. Money into Margaret's account. Payments to Arthur's firm. Payments to Brooke's branding machine. Q.S. Logistics formed using my identity. Delaware settlement signed with my forged name. Brooke's award package purchased. Arthur's audit pressure. Failure bill sent to humiliate me into paying the exact liquidity gap. I stared at the timeline on my screen. It was no longer a family mess. It was a system. Hattie closed the trust folder and placed her palm on top of it. Quinn, she said, your mother is going to invite you to the Founders Gala. I looked up. Why would she do that? Because she will want a public correction. A performance. She will offer to soften the damage if you make the first payment. That sounds exactly like her. She will also try to put you in a lower position at the event. Separate entrance. Service badge. Something petty enough to satisfy her and visible enough to warn you. I stared at my grandmother. You sound very sure. I was a judge for 32 years, she said. People are rarely original. They just change clothes. My phone buzzed one more time. Margaret again. Founders Gala is Friday. Bring $50,000 as a first good faith payment. And I may consider removing some people from the email thread. Use the service entrance to avoid confusing our high-profile guests. I turned the screen toward Hattie. She read it. Then she sat back, calm as a verdict. There it is, she said. I looked at the failure bill, then at the timeline, then at the message inviting me to enter through the service door of a gala my stolen money had helped decorate. My mother thought she was lowering me. For the first time in my life, I understood something clearly. Sometimes you walk through the door they assign you because it gives you the best view of the room. I took the service entrance because my mother had asked for a performance, and I believed in giving people enough rope to decorate the room themselves. The Founders Gala was held at the Whitmore Hotel, a downtown Hartford landmark with marble floors, brass elevators, and chandeliers that looked like they required their own insurance policy. It was the kind of place where people spoke softly because money had already done the shouting. I arrived 20 minutes early, wearing the same navy blazer, an ivory blouse, black trousers, and low heels sensible enough to run in if a banker got emotional. My tablet was tucked under my arm. Inside it were the failure bill, the metadata report, the Delaware settlement, the forged signature comparison, my trust records, the wire transfers, and the payment to Brooks Award promotion firm. In other words, light evening reading. Grandma Hattie had wanted to come with me right away. I told her no, not because I did not need her. I needed her more than I wanted to admit. But Margaret expected me to show up either scared or angry. She expected a daughter who had been cornered. She did not expect a witness who had already catalogued the room. So I walked down the narrow side hallway behind the hotel kitchen, past rolling carts of silver trays and staff moving with the calm speed of people who actually worked for a living. A young woman at the service check-in glanced at her clipboard. Name? Quinn Sterling. Her expression changed. Just a little. That told me my mother had prepared the ground. She searched through a small stack of badges and handed me one with a tight smile. It read, Service access. Not guest. Not family. Service access. I looked at it for a second, then clipped it to my blazer. My mother had spent a lifetime teaching me the same lesson in different outfits. Know your place. Tonight? She had printed it on plastic. A waiter carrying champagne flutes paused near me. He was probably in his early 20s, with tired eyes and a bow tie already slightly crooked. You need directions? He asked. I think I have been directed enough for one evening, I said. He smiled like he understood more than he should. Ballroom is straight through. Then left. But if you want to avoid the main crowd, use the hallway by the coat room. Thank you. No problem. And for what it is worth, that badge is ridiculous. I looked down at it. You have no idea. He leaned closer and lowered his voice. At this hotel, ridiculous, usually has a sponsor. That was the first honest thing anyone had said to me all night. I followed the hallway toward the ballroom. The sound reached me before the doors did. Soft piano, polished laughter, silverware, and the low hum of people enjoying themselves in clothes that cost more than my first car. Through a gap near the entrance, I saw the main room. Tall floral arrangements, gold table settings, white linens, a stage with a podium, a large screen showing the Sterling Foundation logo beside the Vance family crest. So that was the game. This was not only a gala, this was a courtship display. Brooke was not just attending as an honoree. She was being presented as a future Vance. A polished, charitable, business-minded woman from a respected family. Clean history, clean money, clean reputation. I almost admired the confidence. Almost. Margaret spotted me the moment I stepped in. She was across the ballroom in a champagne-colored dress, pearls at her throat, hair perfect, smile locked in place. Her eyes dropped to my badge, and satisfaction flashed across her face so quickly, most people would have missed it. I did not. My job was noticing what people hoped would pass unnoticed. She crossed the room with Arthur beside her. My father wore a charcoal suit and the expression of a man attending his own audit in public. Quinn, Margaret said, her voice warm enough for nearby donors. You came. I was invited. Her smile tightened, through the appropriate entrance. I hope. I touched the badge. The plastic really brings out my eyes. Arthur looked away. Margaret leaned closer. This is not the night for sarcasm. That is unfortunate, I said. I brought extra. Her nostrils flared just enough to be satisfying. Arthur cleared his throat. Quinn, your mother is trying to handle a difficult situation with grace. I looked at him. Is that what we are calling public debt collection now? His face went pale around the mouth. Margaret's voice dropped. You were asked to bring a good faith payment. $50,000. I said. A couple near us glanced over. Margaret's smile returned instantly. Family matters can be complicated. Yes, I said. Especially when they come with routing numbers. For 1 second, her eyes changed. Good. She did not know how much I had. Not yet. Brooke swept over before Margaret could answer. She wore a soft blush designer gown and a diamond bracelet that caught the light every time she lifted her hand. Silas Vance stood with her. Tall, composed, careful. Beside him was his father, Warren Vance, a silver-haired man with sharp eyes and the stillness of someone who enjoyed watching people reveal themselves. Brooke looked at my badge and smiled. Oh, Quinn, I told Mom that might be a little harsh. You did? Well, she said lightly. We did not want guests to be confused. About whether I was family or evidence? Her smile froze. Silas looked at me more carefully. Warren Vance did not blink. Margaret stepped in. Quinn has always had a difficult sense of humor. That is true, I said. I laughed when someone called Brooke an entrepreneur. Brooke's cheeks colored. Arthur whispered. Quinn? There it was again. My name used as a leash. A staff member approached Margaret and said the program was ready. She smoothed her dress and turned back into the woman the room expected. Graceful. Charitable. Untouchable. You will stand near the side, she told me. Please do not make this evening harder than it needs to be. I looked toward the stage. I was just thinking the same thing. She did not understand the answer. That made it better. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly. Guests moved toward their tables. I stayed near the wall, close enough to see the stage and far enough to appear exactly where Margaret wanted me. Present. Visible. Diminished. My tablet screen was dark against my palm. Brooke went up first. The applause was strong. The kind of applause people give when they know the cameras are running. She stood at the podium with her perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect purchased resume. Tonight, she began, I want to thank my parents for believing in investment. Not just financial investment, but emotional investment. They taught me that when you choose the right dream and the right daughter, the returns can be extraordinary. A soft laugh moved through the room. My mother dabbed at her eyes. Arthur clapped with the enthusiasm of a hostage in a good suit. I stood by the wall wearing a service access badge and watched my stolen trust fund receive a standing ovation in a blush gown. Brooke continued. I am honored to announce not only the next phase of my company, but also a personal milestone. Silas and I are engaged. The room erupted. Margaret pressed both hands to her chest like she had just witnessed a miracle instead of a merger with catering. Silas smiled politely and joined Brooke on stage. He kissed her cheek. Cameras flashed. Guests clapped. The Vance name moved through the room like a blessing. Then I looked at Warren Vance. He was not watching Brooke. He was watching me. His eyes dropped to my service access badge. Then to the tablet in my hand. Then back to my face. He knew something did not fit. Old money. Real old money. Has a nose for risk. It can smell desperation through perfume. A waiter passed near me. The same young man from the hallway, he murmured, without turning his head. You okay? I kept my eyes on the stage. Getting there. My phone buzzed. A text from Grandma Hattie. Hold position. 2 words, no punctuation. More comforting than any speech my parents had ever given. Margaret took the podium after Brooke. She spoke about legacy, family values, stewardship, and sacrifice. She used the word integrity 3 times, which felt ambitious under the circumstances. Then she looked toward me. And as every family knows, she said, some investments flourish, while others teach us difficult lessons about responsibility. Heads turned. There it was. The public squeeze. She did not name me. She did not have to. The badge did the pointing for her. I felt the old heat rise in my chest. Not shame this time. Something steadier. The room expected me to lower my eyes. Instead, I looked straight at my mother. She raised her glass. To the daughter who made our sacrifices worthwhile. Everyone looked at Brooke. Everyone clapped, and I stood in the shadows, holding a tablet full of receipts. While Warren Vance watched me like a man reconsidering a contract, my mother thought she had erased me from the room, but she had made one mistake. She had put me close enough to the system to access it. Being close to the system meant I could see how it breathed. And that was exactly where my mother had made her mistake. The ballroom was still applauding Brooke's engagement like she had discovered oxygen and agreed to share it with the rest of us. Cameras flashed. Champagne moved from tray to hand to smile. Margaret stood near the stage, glowing with the satisfaction of a woman who believed she had successfully buried one daughter and launched the other into old money. I stayed near the side wall, wearing my service access badge and holding my tablet like a menu no one had bothered to read. A staff member passed behind me carrying a tray of empty flutes. I stepped slightly back to let him through. "Thank you," he whispered. "You're doing the hard part," I said. He gave a quick grin. "Not according to your badge." I looked down at the plastic clipped to my blazer. This badge has a very high opinion of itself. Before he could answer, Margaret's voice cut across the space. "Quinn." Not loud. Not yet. Margaret never started loud in public. She used volume the way some people used perfume, carefully, only when she wanted others to notice. I turned. She was walking toward me with Brooke at her side. Arthur trailed behind them, his expression tight. Silas stayed near the stage. But Warren Vance watched from a few yards away, with one hand resting on the back of a chair. Margaret's smile was still in place, but her eyes had gone hard. "Why are you speaking with staff?" she asked. The young waiter froze behind me. I felt more embarrassed for her than for myself. That is one of the strange gifts of growing up with people who worship status. Eventually, you realize how small they sound. "I was saying thank you," I said. Margaret's smile sharpened. Staff should not mingle with guests. The waiter's face turned red. I looked at my badge, then back at her. "You may want to decide which category I am in before you continue." Brooke laughed softly. "Quinn, please, don't make this awkward." That was Brooke's special talent. She could pour gasoline on a rug and then complain about the smell. Arthur stepped closer. "Let's keep our voices down." "Wonderful idea," I said. "You first." His jaw tightened. Margaret leaned in. "You were allowed to attend tonight as a courtesy. Do not confuse that with permission to embarrass this family." I almost admired the nerve. She had sent a public invoice calling me a failure, assigned me a service entrance, and now she was worried I might embarrass the family. That was like setting the kitchen on fire and scolding the smoke alarm for being dramatic. Before I could answer, the ballroom doors opened. Not the side doors, the main doors. The piano softened. A few heads turned. Then more. Then the kind of silence moved through the room that does not need an announcement. Grandma Hattie stood at the entrance. She was not in a wheelchair. She was not confused. She was not being guided gently by some nurse, as Margaret had trained people to imagine. She wore a dark, formal suit with a pearl brooch pinned near her shoulder. Her silver hair swept back, and her silver-tipped cane in one hand. Beside her stood a man in a conservative dark suit, with rectangular glasses and a leather portfolio tucked under one arm. I recognized him from the documents Hattie had shown me, Mr. Carlyle, the financial auditor currently reviewing Arthur's firm. Behind them was Hattie's attorney, calm, neat, and carrying a folder so thin it looked harmless. That folder worried me more than a suitcase would have. Margaret's face changed so quickly I almost missed the real expression beneath the smile. Fear. Then she covered it with concern. "Mother," she said, moving forward. "What are you doing here?" Hattie walked into the ballroom at a steady pace. Her cane touched the floor with small, exact clicks. Click, click, click. Every sound seemed to straighten the room. "I received an invitation," Hattie said. Margaret gave a soft laugh. "Meant for the guests." "I'm afraid there must have been some confusion. This evening has been very stimulating. Perhaps we should get you somewhere quiet." Hattie stopped in front of her. "I have spent 32 years listening to attorneys argue before lunch," she said. "A charity gala will not overstimulate me." A few guests shifted. Brooke moved beside Margaret. "Grandma, we're just worried about you." "No, Brooke," Hattie said. "You are worried because I am here." Brooke's smile disappeared. Arthur finally stepped forward. "Mother, this is not the place." Hattie turned her head toward him. Arthur, if you knew where the place was, we would not be standing here. That landed hard. Warren Vance's eyebrows lifted slightly. Silas looked from Brooke to Hattie and back again, the polite smile gone from his face. Margaret recovered enough to place a hand lightly on Hattie's arm. You're having an episode. The whole room heard it. That was the point. Margaret wanted the word to do the work. Episode. Confused. Elderly. Unreliable. One soft little label to dismiss a woman who had built more legal authority before breakfast than Margaret had built in her entire social calendar. Hattie looked down at Margaret's hand until Margaret removed it. Then Hattie raised her voice. Clear. Controlled. Perfectly steady. I am not the one losing my mind. Margaret. The ballroom went still. I am the one who still owns the deed to this hotel. Hattie continued. And I would like to know why my granddaughter is wearing a service access badge at her own property. For a moment, nobody moved. I heard a spoon touch a plate somewhere near the back. My mother's face went pale under her makeup. Brooke blinked. What? Arthur whispered. Mother. Don't. Indecided. Hattie did not look at him. She looked at me. Quinn, she said. Come here. No apology. No sweet speech. No dramatic hug in front of the crowd. Just my name. Spoken like it belonged to me. I walked across the ballroom. Every guest watched. Every camera lowered. Every whisper waited for permission to exist. When I reached Hattie, she touched the badge clipped to my blazer. May I? I nodded. She unclipped it and held it between two fingers like it smelled bad. This, she said, turning it toward Margaret. Was your idea? Margaret's mouth opened, then closed. Brooke tried to laugh. It was just to avoid confusion. Hattie looked at her. Then allow me to clarify. She handed the badge to Mr. Carlyle. He took it without expression and slipped it into a plastic evidence sleeve from his portfolio. My mother noticed that. So did my father. Evidence sleeve is one of those small items that can ruin a very expensive evening. Warren Vance stepped closer. Judge Sterling. Did I hear you correctly? You own the Whitmore Hotel? Hattie turned to him. Through a holding company established before Arthur learned how to mismanage inherited confidence. Arthur flinched. There are insults. And then there are facts with good tailoring. Hattie continued. The Sterling Foundation uses this ballroom under a legacy arrangement, one that requires compliance with hospitality standards, donor ethics, and basic decency. Though apparently the last one needed to be stated in writing. A low murmur spread through the room. Margaret tried again. This is a family matter. No, Hattie said. A family matter is who brings cranberry sauce to Thanksgiving. This is a legal and financial matter occurring on property I control. At an event using my family's name. While my granddaughter is being publicly humiliated with a badge assigned under false pretenses. I stood beside her and said nothing. For once, I did not need to. Hattie's presence did not rescue me by making me smaller. She rescued me by making the truth larger than the room. Brooke looked at Silas. This is being blown out of proportion. Silas did not answer. His father did. Miss Sterling, Warren said to Brooke. Why was your sister directed through a service entrance? Brooke's mouth tightened. Because she has created some financial stress for the family. I felt Hattie turn slightly toward me. There it was. Brooke had stepped onto the record all by herself. Margaret cut in. Quinn has outstanding obligations. We were trying to handle things discreetly. I almost laughed. Discreetly. The woman had emailed 50 people an invoice titled, Cost of Raising a Failure. If that was discretion, I would hate to see her version of a parade. Hattie held out her hand toward me. The tablet. Please. I gave it to her. She did not unlock it. She simply held it, then looked at Margaret. You brought Quinn here to shame her into paying $50,000 tonight. Margaret's face froze. Arthur stared at the floor. Brooke's eyes widened. Warren Vance became very still. Hattie turned to Mr. Carlyle. Please note the reaction. He opened his portfolio and made a note. My mother found her voice. This is outrageous. No, Hattie said. This is preliminary. That word changed the temperature in the ballroom. Preliminary meant there was more. Preliminary meant documents. Preliminary meant nobody here was leaving with the simple version. Margaret looked around and saw what I saw. Donors no longer smiling. guests no longer admiring, Warren Vance no longer politely neutral, and Brooke no longer glowing under the light she had purchased with my future. Hattie placed the tablet back in my hands. "Quinn," she said, "I believe your mother has made enough announcements for one evening." She turned toward the nearest hotel manager, who had appeared near the front with the terrified posture of a man calculating liability in real time. "Please prepare a screen in the private dining alcove," Hattie said. "Visible enough for interested parties. Quiet enough for those who still believe dignity is possible." The manager nodded quickly. Margaret whispered, "Mother, please." Hattie looked at her with the calm of a closing courtroom. "You wanted accountability tonight, Margaret." Then she tapped her cane once against the marble floor. "So we will have it." The manager moved before Margaret could find another polite lie to stand behind. That was the thing about hotel staff. They knew power when it walked in with paperwork. Within minutes, a private dining alcove beside the ballroom had been opened. Not hidden, not fully public, but visible enough that the people who mattered could see where the evening had shifted. A large screen was rolled into place. Chairs were arranged in a loose half-circle. The hotel manager looked like he wanted to dissolve into the wallpaper. But he was efficient. And at that moment, efficiency was my favorite personality trait. Grandma Hattie sat at the head of the table, not because anyone invited her to, because everyone understood she belonged there. I stood beside the screen with my tablet connected to the display. Mr. Carlyle, the auditor, sat to Hattie's right with his portfolio open. Hattie's attorney, Mr. Wexler, sat to her left, calm enough to make silence feel expensive. Warren Vance took a seat across from them. Silas stood behind his father, arms folded, his expression no longer romantic or social. He was watching like a man who had suddenly realized engagement photos could become evidence. Margaret remained standing. That suited her. Sitting would have made her look like a defendant. And she still believed posture could save her. Arthur hovered near the end of the table, one hand on the back of a chair, as if he might sit if someone else accepted responsibility first. Brooke crossed her arms. "This is insane." Hattie looked at her. "No. Dear, this is organized." That shut her up for about 3 seconds, which was close to a family record. Margaret turned to Warren Vance. "I apologize for this uncomfortable interruption. My mother has always had a flair for theatrics." Hattie's attorney lifted his eyes from the folder. "Judge Sterling has requested a limited factual review. Nothing theatrical about that." Margaret smiled at him like she was deciding where to bury his reputation. I tapped my tablet. The first image appeared on the screen. My mother's PDF. Sterling Family Asset Recovery. Quinn Sterling. Below it, the line that had started the whole thing. Cost of raising a failure. A few people at the edge of the alcove leaned closer. Guests were pretending not to watch, which is rich people code for watching with better posture. I kept my voice even. This document was sent last night by Margaret Sterling to approximately 50 recipients, including family members, business contacts, donors, and social acquaintances. It claimed I owed my parents $347,000 for the cost of raising me. Margaret lifted her chin. It was an emotional document, not a legal one. "Interesting," I said, "because it included itemized charges, supporting references, and a demand for payment." I tapped again. The metadata report appeared. The visible author field lists Margaret Sterling, but the embedded creation history shows the file was created on a device named BKS MacBook Pro. Brooke's face changed. "Not much." "Enough." I looked at her. "Brooke Catherine Sterling." She laughed too quickly. "That proves nothing. I help Mom with documents all the time." "I know," I said. "That is becoming clear." Warren Vance looked from Brooke to the screen. I moved to the next slide. The invoice includes a line item titled Legal Settlement Fees, 2019, for $85,000. The amount appeared enlarged. Brooke stopped moving. "This was the first item that stood out to me," I continued, "because I have never been sued, never entered a settlement, and never authorized any legal agreement in Delaware." Arthur finally sat down, not gracefully, more like his knees had received bad news. I tapped again. The Delaware business registration appeared. Q. IS. Logistics LLC. Managing member, Quinn E. Sterling. My former address. Partial social security match. The room went colder. This company was formed in my name without my knowledge. It was later sued by a vendor for unpaid fees. The settlement amount was $85,000. The same amount listed on the failure bill. Brooke snapped. You are making this sound worse than it was. I looked at her. The room held still. Brooke, I said, using someone's legal identity to create a company is already past the point where tone can help you. Silas looked down. That was the first time I saw him understand who he had almost married. I brought up the signature page. Quinn E. Sterling. Only it was not mine. This is the signature used on the settlement. I brought up my real signature beside it. Then Brooke's signature from old business filings. Then the comparison markers. My signature is on the left. The Delaware settlement is in the center. Brooke's handwriting samples are on the right. This preliminary handwriting comparison shows a 94% similarity between Brooke's known writing and the forged settlement signature. Brooke's mouth opened. No sound came out. That may have been my favorite part of the evening. Margaret recovered first. Preliminary. That word matters. It does, I said. Which is why Grandma Hattie has already arranged for a certified forensic handwriting examiner. Mr. Wexler nodded once. Margaret looked at him, then at Hattie. Hattie said nothing. She did not need to. The silence had a gavel in it. I moved to the next file. The original trust documents. My name. Quinn Elise Sterling, Beneficiary Trust. Established by Harriet Elaine Sterling. Hattie's voice entered for the first time. I created equal trusts for both Sterling daughters. Brooke, Catherine Sterling, and Quinn Elise Sterling. Both were funded for education, housing stability, and early adult independence. I looked at the screen, not at my parents. By the time I turned 18, my trust should have held approximately $500,000. A murmur moved through the watching guests. I tapped again. Withdrawal records, transfers, account names, dates. My trust was drained to zero the month I turned 18. Arthur whispered. It was complicated. That small sentence did something to me. Not because it hurt, because it was so weak. I turned toward him. No, Dad. Long division is complicated. This was theft with stationery. Someone near the ballroom entrance coughed into a napkin, which was polite society's version of a laugh. The next slide showed the transfer path, trust, account, Margaret's personal account. Payments to Arthur's firm. Payments to Brooke's award promotion package. Payments to vendors tied to reputation management. Margaret's face had gone flat. No charm now. No social warmth. Just calculation. This is not what it looks like, she said. I almost smiled. That is what people say when it is exactly what it looks like. I enlarged one transfer. Ambrose Recognition Group. Executive Profile Development. Nomination Support. Award Event Placement. Media Package. Total. $72,000. This payment helped secure Brooke's Top 40 Under 40 award package. The same award being celebrated at the garden party where my mother distributed the failure bill. Warren Vance turned slowly toward Brooke. Was the award purchased? Brooke's eyes shone, but not with remorse. With panic. It was promotional support, she said. Everyone does it. Warren's expression did not move. No, everyone does not. Silas stepped back from her. Just one step, but Brooke noticed. Her voice sharpened. Quinn has always been jealous of me. There it was. The old line. The family blanket they threw over every inconvenient fact. I looked at Brooke. Then at the people watching from the edge of the alcove. I was jealous of sleep in college. I was jealous of people whose parents answered financial aid questions honestly. I was jealous of students who did not work closing shifts before finals. But Brooke? I shook my head. No. I was never jealous of a life that needed my stolen trust fund to look successful. Margaret slammed her hand lightly on the table. Not hard enough to be ugly. Just enough to remind everyone she still wanted control. You ungrateful girl. Hattie's cane tapped once against the floor. Margaret froze. Hattie leaned forward. Choose your next word carefully. My mother chose silence. A wise first for her. I moved to the final slide. The failure bill on one side. The missing trust summary on the other. This is what my mother called the cost of raising a failure. I said, $347,000. That number was not based on childhood expenses. It matches the liquidity gap currently threatening Arthur Sterling's firm during an active audit. Mr. Carlyle looked at Arthur. Arthur looked at the table. That was confirmation enough for a room full of people trained to read discomfort as data. I turned to Warren Vance. Mr. Vance. Brooke is not an entrepreneur. She is a professional identity thief. And my mother is her bookkeeper. Brooke gasped. How dare you? I looked at her. Accurately. Silas removed his hand from the back of Brooke's chair. Margaret looked at Arthur like she was searching for a man who had never really existed. Arthur finally spoke. Quinn. This should have been handled privately. I nodded. I agree. That option ended when Mom copied half of Hartford on a bill for my existence. The silence afterward was not empty. It was full of math, the kind my family had avoided for years. Hattie stood slowly. And the room rose with her without being asked. The record is now corrected, she said, and we are not finished. Mr. Wexler opened his thin folder. Arthur stared at it. Margaret stared at it. Brooke looked at Silas. But he was watching the attorney now. That thin folder, I realized, was not harmless. It was the next bill. The thin folder opened with the quiet confidence of a trap that had waited years to spring. Mr. Wexler removed a single document and placed it on the table in front of Hattie. He did not slide it dramatically. He did not clear his throat like a movie lawyer. He simply set it down, squared the edges, and waited. That was when the room finally understood something I had learned the hard way. The dangerous people are not always the ones who shout. Sometimes they are the ones with reading glasses, organized tabs, and no need to impress anybody. Arthur stared at the document, as if it might grow teeth. Margaret folded her hands in front of her waist. Her smile was gone now. Without it, she looked less like a socialite and more like a woman calculating how much damage control could be purchased before midnight. Brooke stepped closer to Silas, but he did not reach for her hand. That tiny space between them did more to frighten her than anything I had shown on the screen. Mr. 94. Wexler, Hattie said. Please proceed. Margaret snapped. Proceed with what? This private ambush? Hattie looked up at her. Margaret? You sent an invoice for Quinn's childhood to half the donor list. Do not lecture anyone here about privacy. A small sound moved through the alcove. Not laughter exactly. More like people swallowing what they wanted to say. Mr. Wexler adjusted his glasses. The document before Judge Sterling is a notice of default tied to a secured business loan issued to Sterling Asset Management. Arthur's face tightened. Warren Vance leaned forward. I looked at my father. For once, he did not look tired. He looked cornered. Mr. Carlyle, the auditor, opened his portfolio and removed a second set of papers. The loan was supported by collateral representations involving trust assets. Margaret said quickly, That is a technical matter. I almost admired her loyalty to bad vocabulary. Technical matter. Liquidity issue. Family misunderstanding. Emotional document. In my family, crime never got called crime if someone was wearing pearls, Mr. Carlyle continued. The asset schedule included references to beneficiary funds connected to Quinn Sterling's trust. I felt the floor settle beneath me, not literally. The Whitmore Hotel was too well built for that. But something inside me went still. My trust had not only been drained, it had been used as collateral. Arthur had not just stolen from the account and hoped nobody would notice. He had placed my future under his business like a floorboard and then acted surprised when it started to crack. Hattie turned to him. Arthur? My father looked at his mother. For a moment, I saw the boy he must have been once. The son of a judge. The man who inherited holdings he did not build. The husband who let Margaret turn family love into a balance sheet because it was easier than admitting he had no spine where it mattered. It was temporary, he said. There it was again. The family word for theft. Temporary, I said. My trust was drained when I turned 18. Arthur looked at me, and his voice came out soft. We intended to restore it. When? I asked. Before or after Mom billed me for being born. His mouth closed. Margaret turned on him. Do not answer that. That was when Warren Vance stood. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The room adjusted around him. Mr. First. Sterling, he said. Did your firm represent these trust assets as available collateral during negotiations connected to the Vance partnership? Arthur swallowed. Brooke cut in. This has nothing to do with the engagement. Warren looked at her. Everything has to do with the engagement when marriage is being used to support a business relationship. Silas finally spoke. Brooke, did you know about Q? ES. Logistics? She turned toward him. Eyes wide. Already preparing tears like stage props. Silas. You know how complicated family businesses can be. He stepped back another inch. No, he said. I know how due diligence works. That was the sentence that broke her face. Not my evidence. Not Hattie's cane. Not the trust records. Due diligence. Those two words told Brooke the fantasy was over. She had not found a husband. She had found a background check with a family crest. Margaret moved quickly toward Warren. This is being exaggerated by a bitter daughter who has always resented her sister's success. Hattie spoke before I could. Margaret. One word. My mother stopped. Hattie's voice stayed low. If you call stolen money success one more time in my presence, I will ask Mr. Wexler to read the rest of the file aloud. Margaret's lips pressed together. Brooke looked from face to face. This is insane. Quinn walked in here with a tablet and suddenly everyone believes her? No, Warren said. She walked in here with records. Brooke's eyes flashed. You are going to throw away everything because of some old paperwork? Silas looked at her like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Old paperwork, he said, with my fiancé's forged signature trail attached to it. Brooke recoiled. I did what I had to do. Nobody was helping me. Mom and Dad believed in me. Quinn never needed anything. She was always fine. There it was. The oldest excuse in our house. Quinn is fine. Quinn can handle it. Quinn does not need help. Quinn can sleep later. Pay later. Heal later. Eat later. Break later. I looked at her. Being quiet was not the same as being fine. For once, Brooke had no comeback. Arthur suddenly pushed his chair back. Margaret, this was your idea. My mother turned slowly. The air changed. Arthur pointed toward the screen. Toward the failure bill, still displayed beside the trust records. The invoice. The email. The public pressure. I told you it was too much. Margaret stared at him like he had committed the real betrayal of the evening. You told me the firm would collapse without money. I did not tell you to humiliate her in front of everyone. No, she said, voice rising. You only told me we needed $347,000 immediately. You only told me the auditors were circling. You only told me the Vance arrangement had to close before anyone looked too hard at Brooke's background. Arthur's face drained of color. Mr. Carlyle wrote something down. Hattie's attorney did too. I did not move. Sometimes the best thing a person can do is stop talking and let guilty people discover acoustics. Margaret realized what she had said a second too late. Brooke whispered. Mum? Warren Vance buttoned his jacket. That small, formal gesture ended the engagement more clearly than any argument could have. Silas, he said. Silas looked at Brooke for one long moment. Then he removed the engagement ring box from his inside jacket pocket. Not a ring from her finger. They had not gotten that far. Thank God. Just the box. Meant for photographs. Announcements. The lovely staged future my mother had been arranging, like flowers over a sinkhole. He placed it on the table. I think we are done here, Silas said. Brooke's voice cracked. You cannot be serious. I am being cautious, he said. Something your family appears to consider optional. Warren turned to Hattie. Judge Sterling. I appreciate the clarification. The Vance family will suspend all discussions with Sterling Asset Management immediately. Arthur stood. Warren, please, we can resolve this. Warren looked at him with the clean disgust of a man who had just avoided stepping into mud. No, Arthur, you can resolve it with your attorneys. Then he and Silas walked out. Brooke followed 2 steps. Stopped, then spun toward me. You ruined my life. I heard those words. And for the first time, they did not land. Not because they were not cruel. Because they were absurd. Brooke, I said. Your life was not ruined by the person who found the documents. It was ruined by the person who signed my name. Her face twisted. Over a little bit of money? The room went silent again. A little bit of money. $500,000 stolen from my trust. $85,000 in a forged settlement. $347,000 demanded under public shame. My credit. My name. My future. My dignity. A little bit of money. Hattie stood. This time, she did not need the cane for balance. She used it like punctuation. Mr. Wexler, she said. He handed Arthur and Margaret copies of the notice. Because trust assets connected to Quinn Sterling were fraudulently accessed and represented in loan documentation. Mr. Five missed, Wexler said. The lender has called the note. The default triggers review of the broader Sterling estate obligations. Arthur's hands trembled around the paper. Margaret read the first page. And for once, her face showed the truth before she could dress it. Panic. The estate? She said. Mr. Wexler nodded. Yes. Hattie looked at my parents. Calm as winter pavement. You built a life on money that was not yours, she said. Now the foundation is being inspected. Arthur sat down again. Hard. Margaret clutched the notice against her champagne dress. Brooke looked around for someone to comfort her. But the room had finally run out of volunteers. I stood beside the screen. The failure bill still glowing behind me. My mother had sent it to make me look like a debt. Now it had become the document that pulled every hidden account, every forged signature, every polished lie into the light. Mr. Wexler closed his folder. We will continue this discussion at Judge Sterling's estate in 3 days, he said. Hattie turned to me. Quinn. We are leaving. I nodded and disconnected my tablet. As we walked out of the alcove, nobody stopped us. Not Margaret. Not Arthur. Not Brooke. For the first time in my life, the Sterling family did not know what to call me. Failure no longer fit. Liability no longer worked. And daughter, after what they had done, sounded far too generous. Hattie's estate looked different 3 days later. Not because the house had changed, but because I had. The same iron gate opened. The same maple trees lined the driveway. The same brick walls stood under the pale afternoon light. But this time, I did not arrive as the granddaughter sneaking in with a folder full of pain at 3 a.m. This time, I arrived with a lawyer's calendar invite, a tablet full of records, and the strange calm that comes when people finally run out of places to hide. Grandma Hattie had asked everyone to come at 2 o'clock. My mother arrived at 1:55 because Margaret Sterling would rather admit to fraud than appear unfashionably late. She stepped out of a black town car, wearing a cream coat, oversized sunglasses, and the expression of a woman who had spent 3 days rehearsing concern in a mirror. My father followed her. Arthur looked older. Not wiser. Just older. His suit was pressed, but his shoulders had folded inward, like the fabric was trying to distance itself from him. Brooke arrived last. She was still wearing the blush designer dress from the gala, or one almost exactly like it. It had wrinkles near the waist and a faint stain along the hem. Her hair was styled but not perfect. Her makeup was too heavy around the eyes. She looked like someone who had discovered consequences and found them personally offensive. I stood near the study window when Mrs. Alvarez showed them in. Margaret saw me first. Her mouth tightened. Quinn. Margaret, I said. That landed harder than Mom would have. She removed her sunglasses slowly. So this is how we are doing things now? I looked at her. With appointments? Yes. It is a nice upgrade from mass email humiliation. Arthur closed his eyes for half a second. Brooke dropped into a chair without being invited. Can we get this over with? Some of us still have lives. Grandma Hattie looked up from behind her desk. The room corrected itself. Brooke sat straighter. Hattie wore a dark suit, her silver hair pinned back, a pearl brooch at her collar. She did not look like a grandmother hosting family. She looked like a chief justice who had allowed relatives into chambers as a courtesy. Mr. Wexler sat to her left. Mr. Carlyle, the auditor, sat to her right. On the desk were several folders, a recorder, and the original failure bill printed on heavy white paper. My mother noticed the recorder. This is unnecessary, she said. Hattie said, so was billing your daughter for being born. Sit down. Margaret sat. For once, nobody mistook obedience for dignity. Hattie folded her hands. We are here to settle the immediate family and financial matters surrounding Quinn Sterling's trust. Sterling Asset Management. The fraudulent use of Quinn's identity. And the public document Margaret distributed under the title, Cost of Raising a Failure. Brooke rolled her eyes. You keep saying it like it was some official thing. It was just a family bill. I looked at her. You created it on your laptop. Her face flushed. I helped Mom format it. You also helped yourself to my name in Delaware. Allegedly. Margaret cut in. Mr. Wexler looked at her. Mrs. Sterling. This is not a courtroom. But if you prefer courtroom language, we can arrange that. Margaret went quiet. Hattie opened the first folder. Arthur. Your firm is in default. The note has been called. Regulatory review is expanding. The Vance partnership is dead. Arthur's voice came out rough. Mother. I know things look bad. No. Hattie said. Bad is a roof leak. This is structural collapse. That was Grandma Hattie. No wasted words. No emotional foam on top. Just a clean cut. Margaret leaned forward. Changing tactics. I could almost see the old social machine turning behind her eyes. Hattie, she said softly. We made mistakes. I will admit that. But everything we did for family. The room went so still that even Brooke stopped moving. Margaret placed a hand against her chest. Arthur's company was under pressure. Brooke had opportunities. Quinn was always so independent. She never seemed to need the help the way Brooke did. There it was again, the polished version of theft. Quinn did not need it. Quinn could take it. Quinn would survive. I looked at my mother and realized she had never seen my strength as something to respect. She saw it as permission to take more. Margaret's eyes grew wet. Right on schedule. I am her mother, she said. No mother is perfect. I was trying to hold this family together. I laughed once, not loudly, just enough. Margaret turned to me. You think this is funny? No. I said, I think it is predictable. You called me a failure in front of 50 people. Now that the records are on the table, you want to be called a mother again? Her face hardened. Hattie looked at me, and I knew she approved, though she would rather be audited than say so in public. Arthur leaned forward. Quinn, I am sorry. I studied him. That was the first apology he had given me since the garden party. Maybe the first real one in years, but it arrived dressed in fear. You are sorry because Grandma owns the debt, I said. His eyes flicked toward Hattie. That answered the question before his mouth could lie. Brooke stood. This is ridiculous. Grandma can fix this. She always fixes everything. She is just trying to scare us. Hattie opened the second folder. No. Brooke, I am finished fixing what you break. Brooke's lips parted. Hattie pulled out a document and placed it on the desk. Through a holding company. I purchased the outstanding debt tied to Sterling Asset Management. Arthur stared at her. Margaret whispered. You what? I bought the debt, Hattie said. Quietly. Legally. At a discount. Since your firm's reputation is currently worth less than your floral budget. I had to bite the inside of my cheek, Hattie continued. That gives me authority over enforcement actions connected to the collateral you misrepresented, including the estate obligations attached to the family residence. Margaret's face went pale. The house? She said. The house, Hattie replied. Brooke looked between them. Wait. Our house? Hattie turned to her. Not yours. Brooke actually looked offended by the concept of property law. Arthur gripped the arms of his chair. Mother. Please. You cannot put us out. Hattie's eyes did not soften. You put Quinn out of her own future when she was 18. Margaret's voice cracked. She is our daughter. No, Hattie said. She is the daughter you invoiced. That sentence filled the room and left no space for performance. Hattie picked up the failure bill. You calculated the cost of raising Quinn as a failure, she said. So I calculated the cost of raising you as thieves. Margaret flinched. Arthur looked down. Brooke whispered. That is cruel. Hattie turned to her. Cruel is charging your sister rent for existing while living off her stolen trust. Mr. Wexler slid 3 documents across the desk. Arthur and Margaret Sterling, he said. You are being served notice to vacate the family residence within 30 days. Further civil claims related to the trust will proceed unless a restitution agreement is signed. Brooke Sterling. You will receive separate notice concerning Q. is zoning, logistics, and the Delaware settlement. Brooke's face collapsed. You are going to ruin me. I looked at her. No. I am going to stop paying for you. That was the cleanest sentence I had ever spoken to my sister. Margaret turned to Hattie. Voice low now. And Quinn gets what? The house? The money? A little revenge? Hattie looked at me. Then she said, Quinn becomes the landlord of the property until the court finalizes the trust recovery and estate restructuring. Arthur's head snapped up. Margaret stared at me like I had walked through a wall. Brooke made a sound halfway between a laugh and a gasp. She cannot be our landlord. Hattie's expression did not change. She already was your creditor. You just preferred calling her a failure. I stood there, not smiling, not cheering, not feeling the sharp thrill people imagine revenge brings. What I felt was quieter, lighter, like someone had finally taken a hand off the back of my neck. Margaret looked at me then. Really looked. Maybe for the first time all week. Quinn, she said. And now her voice was small. You would let this happen to your parents? I thought about the garden party, the phones pinging, Brooke whispering that I should pay rent for existing, my father standing still, my mother lifting a glass to the daughter who made her sacrifices worthwhile. I am not letting anything happen, I said. I am letting the paperwork tell the truth. Hattie nodded once. Mr. Wexler gathered the signed copies. Brooke began to cry. But even that felt rehearsed and late. Arthur sat frozen. Margaret stared at the failure bill on the desk like it had betrayed her. It had not. It had simply done what records do when people get careless. It remembered. The failure bill stayed on Hattie's desk after everyone else left. And somehow it looked smaller without my mother's voice standing behind it. That surprised me. For days. That document had felt like a weapon. A public sentence. A price tag tied around my neck by the woman who was supposed to know better. But sitting there under Hattie's brass desk lamp, beside legal notices and trust records, it looked like what it really was. Paper. Ugly paper. Sure. Well-formatted cruelty. If we were being generous, but still paper. And paper could be filed, challenged, corrected, and, when necessary, introduced as evidence. The next month did not feel dramatic. That is the part people never tell you about justice. The biggest reversals do not always come with thunder. Sometimes they come through certified mail, revised account statements, signed affidavits, and attorneys who use phrases like pursuant to prior notice while ruining somebody's weekend. My parents had 30 days to vacate the Sterling house. Margaret tried everything during the first week. She called me. I did not answer. She emailed me. I forwarded the messages to Mr. Wexler. She sent one text that said, I hope you are proud of what you are doing to your family. I almost replied. Almost. Then I remembered something Hattie told me while we were drinking peppermint tea in her kitchen. Never argue with someone who is trying to turn your response into their evidence. So I saved the message and made breakfast. That may not sound powerful, but let me tell you. Eating toast while refusing emotional blackmail is an underrated adult milestone. Arthur sent one voicemail. His voice sounded tired, soft, and smaller than I remembered. Quinn. I know mistakes were made. I wish we had handled things differently. Mistakes were made. That phrase should be retired from the English language and locked in a basement with other cowardly expressions. Nobody ever says mistakes were made when they find extra fries in the bag. They say it when they want guilt to float around the room without landing on anybody specific. I did not call him back either. Brooke reacted the way Brooke had always reacted when the world stopped applauding. She blamed the lighting, the audience, the stage. And finally, the person who read the script aloud. Her engagement to Silas ended quietly but completely. The Vance family released a short statement about suspended business discussions and personal privacy. It was polite, cold, and final. In wealthy circles, that is basically a door slam wearing cufflinks. Brooke's award profile disappeared from several promotional pages. Her speaking invitations were postponed. Her social media went private for exactly 4 days. Then returned with a quote about surviving betrayal. I did admire the confidence. Not the honesty. Just the confidence. The Delaware matter moved into formal review. The handwriting report came back supporting what I already knew. The signature on the settlement was not mine. Brooke's attorney tried to frame it as a family misunderstanding tied to an administrative mistake. Administrative mistake. Apparently, my identity had wandered into a shell company. Signed a settlement. And forgotten to tell me. Happens all the time. Right? Meanwhile, the trust recovery began. It was not instant. Real money never moves as quickly as stolen money. There were court filings, bank reviews, settlement negotiations, and long meetings where people in suits discussed my life like it was a damaged account. But this time, I had something I had not had at 18: representation, records, and a grandmother who could make a room full of attorneys sit up straighter just by removing her glasses. Margaret and Arthur moved out of the Sterling house on a gray Thursday morning. I did not go there to watch. That would have felt cheap. Mrs. Alvarez sent me one message after the moving truck left. It is done. That was enough. A week later, I drove by the old house and saw the front windows empty. No flowers arranged for guests. No charity banners. No hired photographer capturing Margaret's version of generosity. Just a big, quiet house, finally free of performance. Hattie had already begun the legal process of restructuring the property. The house would no longer serve as a stage for Sterling Family Theater. She wanted it turned into a community center focused on financial recovery, elder advocacy, and identity theft education. When she told me that, I said, "That is a lot more useful than another room full of people complimenting Mom's centerpieces." Hattie said, "Most things are." I used part of the recovered trust settlement to start a nonprofit for victims of intra-family identity theft and financial abuse. We called it the Sterling Standard. I almost did not use the family name, for obvious reasons, but Hattie convinced me. "Do not let thieves keep the name," she said. "Make it mean something better." So we did. The first clients were not dramatic people. That mattered to me. They were regular people. A retired teacher whose son had opened credit cards in her name. A widower whose daughter had pressured him into signing confusing property documents. A young woman whose parents had used her social security number for utility accounts and then blamed her for the debt. Different stories. Same rotten sentence underneath. Family would never hurt you. That is a beautiful belief when it is true. It is dangerous when it keeps you from checking the paperwork. I learned to give practical advice, especially to older folks who had been taught that speaking up against family was shameful. Check your credit report. Keep copies of legal documents. Do not sign anything under pressure. Do not let someone call theft help, and if a relative says, "You do not trust me?" after you ask to read a document, read it twice. That advice came from experience. And experience is expensive. I had the invoices to prove it. As for Brooke, she did not go to prison in some dramatic final twist. Life is not always that tidy. But she did lose the life she had built on borrowed shine. Without my trust money, without Silas, without the paid awards, without Margaret managing every mess. She had to work a regular retail management job for a luxury boutique outside Providence. I heard that from a cousin who whispered it like retail work was a terminal diagnosis. I said, "Good. She can finally learn inventory." My parents moved into a one-bedroom rental near West Hartford. Margaret told people it was a downsizing season. Arthur stopped going to several clubs where people asked simple questions too directly. They still had comfort. They still had more than most. But they no longer had the mansion, the gala circuit, or the power to turn my name into a family joke. And me? I slept better. That was the part nobody claps for. But it mattered most. I stopped waking up with the old weight in my chest. I stopped hearing my mother's voice every time I checked my bank balance. I stopped feeling guilty for needing proof that my own life belonged to me. 6 months after the garden party, we opened the old Sterling house as a community center. Hattie cut the ribbon with small gold scissors and complained that the bow was crooked. The local paper took pictures. Mrs. Alvarez cried quietly in the hallway. Mr. Lawson from my office came and told everyone he had known I was trouble in the best way. Inside the front lobby, near the entrance, I hung a framed document. Not my degree, not a newspaper article, not the trust recovery notice. The original failure bill. Margaret's masterpiece. Sterling Family Asset Recovery. Quinn Sterling. Cost of raising a failure. Below it, I added a new label. The price of freedom. $0. Worth everything. Some people thought framing it was strange. Maybe it was. But I did not hang it there to relive the pain. I hung it there because shame loses power when you stop hiding the receipt. That bill was meant to prove I owed my family for existing. Instead, it proved they had mistaken quiet for weakness, kindness for permission, and family for ownership. I stood in the lobby after everyone left, looking at that frame under the soft overhead light. Hattie came to stand beside me, her cane tapping once against the polished floor. "Do you hate them?" she asked. I thought about it. Margaret's cold smile, Arthur's silence, Brooke's whisper at the garden party. All of it was still there, but it no longer owned the room inside me. "No," I said. "I am finished paying them attention." Hattie nodded. "That is better." She was right. Hate would have kept me tied to the old house in a different way. I wanted freedom, not a new chain with better branding. When I walked outside, the late afternoon sun was warm on the front steps. The same steps I had climbed as a child, hoping someone inside would notice me for something other than what I lacked. This time, I did not wait to be noticed. I locked the door behind me, slipped the key into my pocket, and walked to my car with my own name, my own records, and my own future finally back where they belonged. With me, the most important lesson in Quinn Sterling's story is that family love should never be used as a bill, a threat, or a weapon. Parents may sacrifice for their children, but real love does not keep a running invoice. It does not shame one child to lift another. It does not hide theft behind words like family pressure or we did what we had to do. Quinn's strength was not loud. She did not win by screaming across a ballroom. She won because she stayed calm, kept records, asked questions, and let the truth speak clearly. That is a lesson many people can use in real life, especially later in life when family, property, money, and trust can become complicated. If someone pressures you to sign papers, pay money, forgive fraud, or stay quiet for the family, slow down, read everything, keep copies, ask for professional advice, love your family, but do not hand over your judgment. Quinn learned that dignity is not given by parents, siblings, money, or status. Dignity is protected by truth, boundaries, and courage. Sometimes freedom begins with one simple decision: stop apologizing for noticing what was wrong.